Hi there, welcome back here. In last lecture, we have separated our functionality of fetching products into its separate file. In this lecture, we'll continue with further improvement. Okay, so let's stay here in our getAllProducts file, and what I want to do now is to create here a function which will be responsible to make a request to some server to fetch a data and return the data from this function. What data I want to fetch? I want to fetch testing data. Let's go to browsers for a second and let's write here JSON placeholder API. JSON placeholder API. Okay, I hope it will work. Let's go to JSON placeholder typecode.com. Okay, we want to test out some of the endpoints that are pre-coded here. Okay, so for example, here this endpoint here, or we can see some of the endpoints here. So for example, to get 200 to-dos or to get the 200 posts, doesn't really matter. Let's click here and you will see endpoint is here. Okay, this is the endpoint, so that's the place where we want to make a GET request. Okay, so from our Next.js application, request will come here and we would like to grab this data and return them to our code. Okay, so let's do it. Let's copy this. Actually, let's copy this, or we can copy it later. Let's go back to our colligators. All right, and here I will create a new function which will be responsible for fetching data. Const. Let's call this function fetch API. You will see why we are calling it fetch API a little bit later. Okay, but fetch API will be responsible to fetch any API if I will provide URL to it. Okay, URL will be endpoint you just saw before. Okay, so fetch API, this will be, of course, asynchronous functionality, so async here because we are making a request to the server. Let's write here const URL, so URL variable name. And our variable name will be the variable you just saw 1 second before. This is the https JSON placeholder.typecode.com/todos. When I will make a GET request here, this should get me my to-dos data. Okay, so we have a URL. Now we can make a request itself. You can make a request very easily in the Next.js. You don't need to import here any other package. You need to use Axios and so on. You can just use here natively fetch. All right, this will be available. Fetch is available in a global context. Okay, so we can just simply call here fetch. We can provide a URL to it. And also we need to provide here, some additional data. Okay, so I'll specify here comma, object, and I will specify here some options. What we want to specify here is a method we are making. So method is the type of the request. We are making GET request. Okay, so let's write here method. And a method will be simply GET request. Okay, and also you can specify your headers like this. And the headers is the types of the data you would like to get back in which format. Okay, so content type like this. You will define here if you would like to get our JSON data back. So that's a dedicated tab for this. Is called application/JSON. All right, so headers, don't forget here comma, and we want to fetch here this fetch data from this URL. Okay, so this will make a request to JSON placeholder typecode.com/todos. It will make a GET request. In the headers, we'll specify we are expecting to get back JSON data, and it will return this data. So the return of this we can assign to new variable. Let's write here const. We can call it some generically, so response, and we'll assign here return. This asynchronous function, so when we want to retrieve data from it, we need to chain here then block, or we need to write here await. And in this case, I'll write await. It's much simpler and more readable. Okay, so we have here fetch. We need to get a data, okay? Because the response will not provide me data straight away. I need to use an additional function to get this data from a response. So if you want to get the data here, let's write here const data. You need to write here response, and on the response you will have a function JSON. You need to call it, and this again asynchronous. It's returning promise, so you need to write here again await in front of it, and it will get you data whatever you are fetching from this endpoint. Now this function will just simply return here this data as an object, so I'll specify here data like this. And that's basically it. I'm specifying it as an object because later maybe I will specify here also error or so on, so I can provide here multiple informations. Okay, so we have our fetch API. We'll copy it, and simply in our products here, we'll call here this fetch API. So let's write here await. Fetch API, we'll call it. And it's no longer true because fetch API now doesn't return the promise of the numbers. So we'll change it later. We'll be changing it more. Okay, so I will specify here just any. So we'll return here a promise of any of any array, and then we are returning products here. And let's see here what's actually complaining this about. Type data any is missing in the following properties from a type any. Oh, okay, so it's complaining that I'm specifying here that I'm returning here array of any, but here I'm defining here that we are returning from here data object. Okay, so there is a conflict in these types of a data. So what we need to actually do, we need to access this data, because this data will get me actual data. So I can get here dot data. Okay, and data type any. All right, implicitly. So yeah, now it's working. So we are getting here our products data, because data we are actual raw data we are specifying under object with the property of the data. So therefore I need to access here on the products data, and now everything should work. When you will save this in your index.tsx file, this product shouldn't be numbers any longer, but you should get here actually this placeholder. And you will refresh. When you will refresh, actually you will see error because you cannot display raw objects inside of a JSX. What you need to do first, you need to stringify them. So let's go back. Okay, and in our index.tsx, instead of a product, in a curly bracket, let's write a JSON.stringify products. So let's wrap it in here. Let's save it, and now you should see here all 200 to-dos. So refresh, and yeah, now you're getting here this 200 to-dos on your screen. So guys, just to recap, in our get all products, now we are specifying function that will be fetching our data. As a server, we are using this endpoint typico.com/todos. Just for now, we are making get requests. Okay, so we are calling here a function which will make a get request. We specify here headers, and this will return me data back on the response. I need to extract them from the response. We need to call a function.json, which is returning promise. That's why I'm writing here evade, and I will get this data under the data, and I will return them from a function as the object, which will be specifying data properties. Okay, so when I want to get my actual raw data, I need to access my data under this data property. So I'm calling here fetch API products, and I need to call here explicitly data because the structure I'm specifying here. If I would specify here, just return here data, not the object, I would get here product straight away, and I could just return here products. Okay, but I'm specifying it as an object, so I need to access this property data here. Okay, guys, that should be it for now. Later, we'll be changing these types, of course. We'll be providing here product types and not any types. Also, we'll be specifying the types here and everywhere. So if you are wondering why I'm not specifying the types now, we'll be changing it very soon. This is just to get some working functionality and then change it. All right, if you want to see actual requests of a get all products, you cannot see these requests here in your browsers now, because what's happening in static props is not happening in your browsers. So if you want to see actual requests, you can just copy it and you can paste it, let's say here, get all products. I'll just call it like this. And now when you will go to a browser, I will refresh this and I will inspect this and I will see the network. Refresh, and you see here, somewhere down here, I will try to make it bigger so you can see. Okay, give me a second. I need to drag it up. All right, now, and here is the to-dos. You see, this is a request URL we are specifying in the fetch. Request method is get. And here also you should see the headers. Let me see the headers we are specifying here. Request headers. All right, and here should be content type. Okay, that's what we are specifying, application JSON. Of course, also the other types that are already specified by the default in the fetch function. But this application JSON, we are specifying this content type. All right, guys, so that should be it for now. Let's go to the next lecture, and we'll be specifying actual specific types of the data we will be fetching and returning. So I hope to see you in the next one. Cheers.